Pachinko. I have no idea how this game works, but the show is absolutely amazing. The show follows Sunja's family through 4 generations of Korean culture, starting with Sunja's father and mother who just desperately want to have a child. They seem like really, really great and nice people. They run a boarding house, and whenever they have Sunja, the father falls in love. Everything in his life revolves around his daughter and making sure that her life is protected. He says this.
네 숨이 붙어 있는 동안에는 뭔 짓을 했어라도 이 세상 더럽은 것들이.
She learns to go and catch different crustaceans and clams and things like that. The way that he checks if she's okay is that he holds his own breath. So when she takes a breath, he takes a breath. And he holds it, and he holds it, and he holds it. And she's down there, and she's just trying to get this thing. Sooner or later, he can't hold his breath anymore. He's gonna pop. He lets out a big gasp, he waits another moment, and Sunja doesn't come up. It's too much for him. He starts charging the water, and then finally, Sunja comes up holding her prize, completely victorious. You can tell that it's a step forward. He realizes that he is raising his daughter correctly. Again, like we said, this is about 4 generations. So now we're gonna flash forward to 1989, the year of your boy's birth. Sunja's grandson, Solomon, is working in New York. The first thing we see is he gets into the elevator and he notices that he's the only Asian man in the elevator. When he gets to his boss's office, he realizes that they're not gonna give him the promotion. There's really no reason why. He's, without a doubt, the best employee. He says it, he explains that like my numbers are better than everyone else's. So he says, well, I have this idea that I'm gonna go to Tokyo, Japan, and I'm going to meet with this Korean woman that owns this hotel. And if we get it, it'll be $10 million for the business, which $10 million in 1989 is not $10 million now. That's a lot more money. I'll put the conversion rate right here. So he makes this deal. He will get the promotion that he was promised. Flashback to Korea in 1910. It's a very different world in Korea. The Japanese occupation of Korea and in the early 1900s is really changing life for a lot of Koreans. They're trying to institute their own culture. They think of the Koreans as less than. There's a lot of prejudice and racism between the Koreans and the Japanese. You can't even say anything bad about the Japanese army. You're not supposed to look at them, you're not supposed to do anything. Whenever one of the people staying at their father's boarding house gets a little bit tipsy, he starts dropping all kinds of hate on the Japanese. But instead of turning him in, her father is slightly naive. He doesn't realize the extent of just letting someone speak. The mother understands though. The mother says, we have to do something, but he says, no, we're not gonna tell anyone. Sunja gets so scared, she runs over and she tells the guy, like, hey, you need to leave. You're gonna cause them to take away my father, and I want my father more than I want you, so I need you out of here. Next thing you know, the military are at the boarding house and they want to know where is this guy that he's saying all these blasphemous things about their occupation. But whenever they do finally find this man who is a close friend of the family, he's not a bad person by any means. They bound him and they take him through the streets so everybody can see. They start to beat him in front of everyone, and Sunja is just left there to watch. Flash forward, Solomon is now on his way to Japan, where he meets up with his father who owns a Pachinko. It's a casino in Japan. I've never been to Japan. I don't know how to play Pachinko. Yeah, it looks like a very fun game. I'd love to play it sometime, but I don't want to play it in LA. I want to play it in Japan, okay? I want it the real thing. So Solomon seems to be slightly ashamed of the Pachinko thing. It's not an honorable business. You can tell that Solomon's father has taken money from the mob, the Yakuza, whatever it is in Japan. I'm not gonna claim to know exactly, but they look like mobsters. Whenever they get home though, this is whenever you kind of find the connection. Sunja is now an older woman. She's amazingly acted by Yuh-jung. I might have butchered that, I'm so sorry. She's the Meryl Streep of Korea. This woman is insanely good. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. And somehow, she's migrated to Tokyo, Japan. She no longer lives in Korea. She greets her grandson just like a grandmother would greet any grandson. She has missed him. She thinks that he needs a sandwich. She's in charge of the household. She's a very, very strong and successful son, which leads into Solomon, her grandson, which has now become even more successful. So she's building this family tree tree of success where everybody is moving up in the world, and it's because of, you know, where the origins come from Sunja and her father and her mother, who worked really hard and really paved the way for the new generation. And then this is whenever you really get into older Sunja's mind. You see how the occupation and the things that happened to her in her childhood really affected her. She didn't say, oh, you'll be happier in America, Solomon. Or she didn't say you should stay in America because you'll be more successful. She says you should stay in America because you'll be safer in America. Solomon seems to take all of this in. He gets up the next day and he shows up at the office. But when he gets into the elevator, he notices something, that everyone's Asian. There's no prejudice because he is an Asian, that he can actually just work and progress without having to fight this stigma or the prejudice that comes along with being an Asian in America. I would like to say in 1989, but still now. When he gets in there, he really notices that he can grow, to the point that the only white businessman that's in charge of the office is actually worried about Solomon. Not like in America where white people are not worried about the Asian guy in 1989, but this guy is worried about Solomon taking his job. So it's the exact opposite of where he came from in America. You can tell that Solomon feels good about this, but you can also tell that Solomon is deep enough to see the confliction and the hypocrisy in all of it. Flashing back to the 1910s, none other than our pretty boy, Lee Min-ho. Yes, he was standing there in his 1920s suit with his cigarette, but he also shares that same disdain that the Japanese people that were occupying Korea have for the Korean people. The Japanese subtitles are in yellow and the Korean subtitles are in blue. He is not speaking in Korean. He's speaking back in Japanese, and then they're speaking to him in Korean, and then they're speaking back and he's speaking back in Japanese. This is something that I think is a very big thing. The way this person thinks is that he's not going to sink down to use the same language as the person that he's governing. He sees Sunja walking in the fish market and he can't help but follow her. It's like any rom-com where they just fall madly head over heels and she's the most beautiful woman that he's ever seen. So as he sees her and as he asks his secretary, who is that woman, he starts to speak Korean. So to me, that means that for this woman, his pride is already out the window. He doesn't care. He loves her. He loves her from the first moment he saw her. He doesn't care about Japan. He doesn't care about Korea. He just saw the love of his life and he'll do anything to talk to her. He stands there like a 1920s Billy Badass would, and he just stares her down, smoking his cigarette, a hat in his hand. She looks over just like a quaint woman would, a woman that doesn't want to show too much interest and is also scared of the Japanese, but also can tell that something is happening. And she looks over and you see something happen to her too. It might be fear, but it might be love. It's interest. It's some sort of intrigue. Overall, I just want to say I'm not going to get too into characters because it's the first episode and I don't want to dissect too much. I think the show is going to be an amazing wild ride of emotions, laughter, and inspiration for people that didn't let something like the color of their skin hold them back. And it's something that we're still fighting today, and it's something that we're fighting all over the world, but especially we're fighting in this country. I haven't read the book. I'm gonna read the book after the series because I kind of already ruined it for myself and I don't want to be doing them at the same time, because you know whenever you watch things at the same time you're always like, but they changed this. I don't want to do that. I just want to enjoy this series for what it is. I want to thank Apple TV Plus for making a show like this. This sort of content really opens people's eyes to the fact that people have to struggle and they're really not that different than us. The only thing different is the color of their skin, and that shouldn't be enough to define anyone's future. So thank you